Hi guys, and welcome to this amazing call on managing your purity. I am joined by Michael and Lisa Kunz from Kunz Coaching. They are relationship coaches, and if you've seen, we've done a video already, and they've just been such a wealth of knowledge to the group. So we actually thought we were going to jump on today and talk about how to manage your purity, especially while single. And so do you guys want to give us a brief background? We know you did it in the last call, but just in case people aren't familiar with you or haven't seen that call yet, about who you are, what you do.
Oh. Yeah. So I was married 20 years, and Michael was married a little 18 years. Mm-hmm. And we both were widowed in all of 2015. And we didn't know each other. And we met 2 years later through our teenage daughters, and we got married in 2018. And since then, the Lord has just given us a heart for singles and working with singles. And we've been offering a class called Fully Alive through Bethel. It's an equip class that we've offered just to help equip singles for marriage.
And we've also had an online class that just kind of got started and is going to be expanding this fall called Choose to Love. And we're still working on that. I haven't completely decided the name, but no, and we were married for quite a while, and we went through a lot of learning to be great at marriage. We did not start that way, and then we were single for 2.5 years.
Unexpectedly.
Yeah, and so that gave us a perspective that we couldn't have had otherwise. So we just wanted to give what we've learned to the single community.
Yeah, and on this topic, as you can imagine, we both were in marriages with healthy sex lives, and all of a sudden we were single and we had to manage our purity. And it was, for me, I can tell you, it was a lot harder to wait the second time than it was the first. And it was a little frustrating. And so it was something that for 20 years I didn't have to manage, and then all of a sudden I was in a situation where I had to manage it. So we feel like we have something a little bit relevant to share today, and we want to share it from a heart that is a little bit maybe more raw and vulnerable than maybe what you guys have heard, more recently.
You'll probably, at the end of this, you'll probably know more about us than
our kids want to. I don't know.
Then maybe we want you to know, but we want to be really real, because we find that's when lives are changed.
Yeah.
So we're going to be open books for this topic.
Yeah. And we actually work with quite a bit through our coaching practice. We work with a lot of BSSM alumni. We love it, but purity, we've noticed, has been an issue. And so we just thought it would be a great topic for today. And
Oh, and maybe one small excerpt. 12 years ago, I had a managed addiction to porn and masturbation. I was very successful in every area of life, but I had this little thing, porn and masturbation, off to the side, and it, from my perspective, it never tweaked any of the rest of my life. But the truth is, it was destroying the rest of my life, even though it was a very small part that never got out of hand. And 11 years ago, coming here, joining men's group here in Bethel, was the most incredible thing that I ever did. And just going through that transition during my first marriage, I've got that perspective too to bring into this, because going into purity in marriage and then being single and continuing and then dating. So yeah, that's an extra twist in all of this.
Love it. I feel like we're going to go deep into stuff today that needs to be said. So I just want to honor you guys for giving your time, for wanting to pour into this community. It's such a blessing, and for being really vulnerable and open, as you guys have been. I think it's going to be really good. And so for those of you watching, the reason I've asked Michael and Lisa to talk about this is I know that the issue of purity can be such a hot topic for singles. We're trying to manage it. I always say our body doesn't know that we're Christian, so it's still is like everybody else's body, but we have to learn to manage it. So I always say that to my friends. And so we want to live a life of purity. And I was just telling them before we got on the call, of just being really vulnerable and transparent, that this is something that I've had to walk out in my Christian walk as well. So I was sexually active before I was a Christian. I've been saved for 13 years. I don't even remember that really anymore. I was so young, but it was something that when I became a Christian, the whole narrative changes. Then it's all about, okay, how do I actually steward this well? How do I protect it? And unfortunately, it wasn't something that I was taught very well on. So, I'd always just like, okay, I'm going to stay away. I'm going to stay really far away, and just be over here, because then that's what I thought purity was. You just don't even acknowledge it. You don't, like, I didn't really have like boyfriends at the time, and so it's really easy to maintain your purity, a lot easier than when you're with someone. And so fast forward to about 6 or 7 years ago, where I did start dating someone for a very brief period of time, and he started crossing my boundaries, but I didn't know that they were boundaries. And so I would say no, and then he would try again, and I'd be like, no, and eventually he just wore me down. I was like, and I remember thinking, oh no, I need to wait. Like, this is inappropriate. But then I thought, but I was like, why? Like, oh, I actually don't know why. And so I didn't have a revelation. I had the Christianese answer, I had the religious reason why I wasn't supposed to do something, but I didn't have a revelation of the reason behind it or the conviction about it, honestly. And I just don't think I respected myself enough to know that my value was worth more than what this person was offering me. And so I compromised, and it's been the only time in my Christian walk where I've actually compromised. And like, we didn't have sex or anything. We definitely went further than I would have liked. And so since then, it's been like the last 7 years really committed to purity and going, okay, God, what's your heart on this? Why do you say these things? Like, and actually really having that strong revelation, to the point where being in previous relationships now, I'm like 100% no. Like, I 100% know where I'm coming from. I have my boundaries. But I think, like we've talked about before we got on the call, having that revelation is so important. And so that leads me into my first question for you guys. What is purity, and why is it important? Let's start from the very beginning.
Wow. That's just a small question to start with. So purity, there's some parts of this purity that everyone would probably pretty much agree with, and then there's some gray areas, and I think that's okay. I know we're talking about sexual purity, so that, by my definition, that would be not engaging in sex, not engaging in activities that lead to sex, foreplay, oral sex, or giving each other orgasms, or touching each other in breasts, privates, those areas. And that's probably pretty agreed on with most people. Like, those would be, okay, those are the boundaries. But what we have actually picked up from is, I love the term of, let's stay on this side of peace. Let's don't go beyond peace. And for some people, that could be, hey, I when I start kissing, my mind goes all the way. And so for each person, they need to know, okay, at what point, and we'll tell you more of our story as we go through it, but at what point have you gone past peace? And instead of saying, oh, don't do this, let's say, okay, let's stay on the side of peace. And so wherever that is for each person, but God created, so this, I know the church has said, no, don't do that. No, it's wrong. God doesn't want you to do that. And I honestly think, yes, God does want you to do that, but it has to be inside of the boundaries of how he created it to work well. And he designed it for marriage. He designed it for a covenant. So he can only show up when it's in a covenant relationship, when it's in marriage. He can't show up otherwise. He can only show up if it's in a covenant marriage, because that's the rules that he created around it. And he also created it for it to be beautiful when it is a gift for the other person. Now we can rewind just a little bit. Masturbation, that is not a gift for another person. That is a fulfillment of your own desire. It is a selfish action. You are doing it for yourself. And I don't know. I know people are on both sides of the fence on whether or not masturbation is allowed in the Bible or not.
Quote unquote a sin.
But I will say this, masturbation won't set you up for success. Masturbation will not get you where you want to be in marriage, in a beautiful, intimate, sexually fulfilling marriage. Masturbation will not set you up for success. Actually, it starts, like to talk to people like, if you can manage your purity as a single person, the skills that it takes to manage your purity as a single person is the same skill that it takes to manage purity in a relationship with someone and to honor them and to not do or to not go past peace. But what is really odd and what we've discovered is, because some people have said, oh, I need to make it to my wedding day. If I can just make it to my wedding day, I will have succeeded. And what we've discovered is the skill that keeps purity while you're single, and that same set of tools that keeps purity inside of a relationship, they are the exact same tools that make sexual intimacy incredible in marriage. You don't leave behind what you learned, but it's something about learning to honor the other person, to exercise restraint, to not do what you want to do, but to do what is in the best interest of your relationship. And so what looks like no sex before marriage, that same set of skills, that same
muscle you
exercise, inside of marriage, it turns into hot, madly passionate sex. And it's incredible. And if you can't, anyway.
I feel like I need to rewind a little bit to answer her question. I love how passionate he is. We both are. Talking about sex is actually one of Michael's favorite topics because he feels like it's such a gift from God.
And I feel like so many people are missing out so much on that gift. But yes.
Yeah, I think, when we go back to, you've asked, what is purity? And if you think about that, God gave us the gift of sexuality for our partner. Purity is staying within the guidelines of saving it for for your spouse. And when we step out of that, when we give something that belongs to us to somebody else, and it doesn't belong to them, it actually, in that act, right, that it creates disconnection from the Father, right? All sin creates disconnection. And that's not God's heart. God's heart is for us to stay in connection. So I don't, and again, it's this, how do we view God? Do we view God as with a big hammer or a big gavel? No. It's actually his heart is for us. It's so that we have this gift to give to another person, this intimacy that we share. It's the closest thing that we can share, like Father, Son, and Holy Spirit shares in the Trinity. Mm-hmm. And so in marriage, it's husband, wife, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, right? It's the closest thing that we get to experience to that. And I think that's such a precious gift. However, what happens is when we actually break kind of the guidelines or rules of that gift that God gave, it creates disconnection with us and God. And then what we've seen is that, and experienced ourselves, is it creates a cycle of shame. It creates this cycle of shame where we don't feel connected to God. We're carrying shame. We feel a little dirty for what we've done. We feel like something's not quite right in between us and the other person because we know we gave something or something was taken. And now how do we reconnect with God? And how do we find our way back to restoration, to restore our connection with God? How do we make the connection here right? Or how do we do that so that, because the enemy, we happen to buy into the lie, like it's too late, it doesn't matter, your purity isn't worth anything anymore, you might as well keep going, it doesn't, it can lead to this cycle of shame that keeps people in this, this negative cycle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love what you guys are saying too, because it's like, what I practice in my single life around self-control is actually going to be multiplied in my married life. And all of that, it's like the fruit. The harvest does come when you get married. And it's like, what have you sowed in your singleness that you'll reap the reward for in marriage? And so for me personally, I struggled with masturbation for 10 years. And I've been free for like 4.5, maybe 5 years. I can't remember right now. But that was a thing for me. I'm like, for me, I wasn't lusting at the time, but it was definitely like a self-gratification or a calming kind of thing. And I always felt such conviction about it, such shame. Oh my gosh, so much shame. But I couldn't seem to get out of it, no matter what I did, no matter who I spoke to, no matter what I put in place. It was just feeling such a need. And for me, my conviction was 100%, this is not from the Lord. This is not God's best for me. I need to be going to Him rather than something else for comfort. And it became such a big deal. And so for me personally, I had a boyfriend who died when I was 15, which was my first real boyfriend. And so that was when it started, because that completely spiraled my life. And so, from that time for like 10 years, so I was like 25, it was just this comfort thing. But the Lord just spoke to me, and I found no matter what I put in place, nothing really was helping me. And that's why I'm really passionate about helping women, especially walk out of masturbation. Like you said, it doesn't give anything. It doesn't bring life at all. And it's actually a gift that's been designed to be given within the context of marriage to that person as well. And to be shared. It's not for self-gratification. And so the only thing that I found really worked for me was intimacy with the Father. The closer I got to Him, the more I was transformed into His image and likeness. The things of the past literally fell away. Like I just one day stopped, and I just never did it again. And it was totally the intimacy with the Lord. And I think it's something especially women don't speak about a lot, but pretty much every woman I've ever met in the church struggles with this or has struggled with it. I haven't met one, no matter who they are, if they're brought up a pastor's kid, no matter what background they have, they've all spoken to me about it. It's just not something we really talk about openly. But I think, like you're saying, there are so many more ramifications. It's not God's best for us. And I think we all really desire to see people walk in freedom from that. So I really love that you guys are bringing this up. So when you do find people that are, stuck in that shame cycle, they're either addicted to porn right now, they're going through masturbation, things like that. What is your first step to the freedom plans that you would help them come up with?
Yeah, well, I think one thing that you touched on, and I think it's super important for people to understand, is that masturbation, it's not just a comfort, it's also a coping tool. Mm-hmm. So it's very similar to alcohol or drugs or shopping or overeating. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. So they're caught up in it, right? In the addiction of it. And they're just shaming themselves and feeling like they're dirty instead of recognizing that is just a coping tool. So first of all, if they can learn new coping tools, that's seriously going to help, right?
So I know when men come into Man Alive, I've been leading there for 10 years now, 9 years. And, it's so when our heart as a man, when our hearts hurt, what do? Well, porn and masturbation is a really easy way to relieve that pain. It actually works to relieve the pain. It's temporary. It doesn't fix the problem, but it does relieve the loneliness, the lack of adventure, lack of connection, whatever it is. And so I know for me, it actually took me a year or so of sobriety, which was not freedom. It was sobriety before I was able to start identifying what was hurting so bad. When a guy comes into my group, some of the first things I do is like, hey, what do you do for adventure? And a lot of times they say, I'm like, okay, you need to get out and you need to be finding your adventure. And the truth is, I'm mountain biking. I've never thought of popping one out when I'm mountain biking.
Pulling over to the side of the trail.
I've never thought of jacking off when I'm rock climbing. Mm-hmm. Whitewater canoeing never crossed my mind. Like, I don't think of porn. That doesn't even hit. because my heart is full. It's got
Mhm.
adventure going on. And the second thing I tell my guys is, hey, every day this week, your homework is to call somebody, because women do a much better job of connecting. Men do a pretty bad job of connecting, especially if they're hurting. And they may do surface level stuff, but I tell them, hey, 30 seconds, call someone, just say, hey, I'm practicing calling you so that I have a good habit when I feel pain next time.
Mm.
Or when I'm about ready to look at porn, I know, okay. So honestly, if every day you're calling a few guys, when the temptation to look at porn or masturbate or something comes along, you're like, oh, wait, I've got this habit that I've been developing. I've got them on speed dial. Boom. Hey, I was just thinking about looking at porn. And like, oh, well, you know what? That could work, but that's not who you are. That's not the solution you want. And I pray for you. And it's a 1-minute phone call. But what I'm teaching men to do is starting to reach out, to connect with other people, to be reminded of who they are in a shame-free environment. And if they call me, hey, I just looked at porn and masturbated. Hey, thank you for calling me. Thank you for choosing connection after disconnection.
Mm.
Thank you for going after your heart. I know you got a journey to go, but you're gonna make it if you keep making these calls. I had one guy that called me after he'd hire a prostitute each time. Like, thank you for giving me this call. Thank you for letting me know. Next time, call me while you're with the prostitute. Next time, call me before the prostitute. Ideally, you want to be calling much earlier than that. But the truth is, learn to connect, and go after adventure. Go after the things that bring your heart alive. You mentioned connecting with God. That's what your heart needed.
Mhm.
And the masturbation helped ease the pressure, but it never went away.
And and I know when he said, some of you may have gone, what? Like, call me while you're with the prostitute or before. You know what?
It's shame-free.
But as
I'm going for healing.
Yeah, and as a lot of times as the church, as Christians, we're like, no, that shouldn't even be acceptable. You need to be perfect. And guess what? It's a journey. And if we take the perfection, that off of it, that people have to be perfect all the time, instead of going, it's a journey, it's a road to health and wholeness. And if we can be with people in the process, that's so much more valuable instead of shaming them. They're already feeling shame, right? We need to love each other as the church to get people into wholeness. And it really isn't much different than what we were talking about in our first interview with you, is that it really is about wholeheartedness. That all it is reflecting, and whether it is porn and masturbation, whether it's a hookup with somebody, whether it's a couple who are going past peace and having premarital sex or giving each other orgasms, there is a love tank that isn't full. There's one of the areas of your heart that isn't full. It's a reflection of that. So you were saying, what can they do? Well, practically, you can start processing and go, okay, where is it in my heart that actually needs more love? What is it? Where is there lack? And first and foremost, I think what you were saying is so vital, which is inviting the Lord into it.
Mhm.
That's the first step. The second step is what Michael said, is you bring community into it.
Mhm.
You need connection, right? We've heard this before, that it's through relationship that we're hurt. These are a reflection of pain, right? And it's through community and relationship that we're actually healed. The Father uses
relationships hurt you and relationships heal you.
Yeah.
You can't get about it any other way. The very thing that caused the pain is the thing you need to walk into with different people, probably.
Yes.
To get that healing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's so good.
The other thing, and I love that, you reiterated what Michael was saying, like the same muscles, the same self-discipline that you're using to maintain and manage your purity as a single is also what is going to help you serve you in marriage. It's going to help protect your marriage, but it's also going to create passion and intimacy in your marriage because it's going to be super safe. But let's not forget the step in between, because that same muscle is actually what's going to, in your relationship, that's where you're tempted, right? That's where you're tempted. You're not tempted as much in marriage.
I mean, look at her. I mean, talk about temptation.
But really, it's also going to set you up for success within your relationship, because it's going to help you manage when you do have intimacy with someone, or you do want connection with someone. It's going to help you maintain your boundaries within the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also going to help make each other feel super safe. And we have worked with couples that either the man wasn't leading well in purity, and I'd love for Michael just to talk about that, but
Mm-hmm.
also where the gal, there's also instances where sometimes it's the gal who's initiating. The guy is saying, hey, I have these standards, but she's initiating, and it just makes it even more of a struggle. I'm not going to say harder. I'm going to say more of a struggle.
More challenging.
More challenging. Yes.
Yes. No, I love that.
Really have to be careful with what word choices we use.
No, I love it. I think we want to be raw about this, right? We want to be real, because there's no point beating around the bush. That doesn't get anyone to freedom.
It doesn't.
So I love what you guys have said, and I love meeting people where they're at. And I think it is naive to think that everyone will just stop straight away, and no matter what they're doing. And same thing with the prostitute comment. Like if someone's doing drugs, and they were trying to walk out freedom, but they're there and they've done it, and then they called you afterwards, or they're in the process like, I really want to get free, I just can't. We need to meet with people in the process. And I think I've seen this, and I think it's something you touched on so well, because they already feel shame. They already know it's wrong. I knew what I had such conviction, but I couldn't get out of it. And I think people who are so desperate need people to come along, to pastor them, to care for them, and actually walk through that journey with them and go, cool, okay, let's come up with a plan. Not to meet with them in their shame, not to bring condemnation, not to heap that upon them. Because honestly, I really do believe condemnation just leads you down further, because you're already doing it because you're feeling shame, and then you feel more shame, and then you do it again, and then you feel more shame. And so I love what you guys talk about, actually meeting people there, coming up with a plan, and knowing sometimes it's instantaneous and God can totally come in. And sometimes it's actually walking out self-control, which can be like a lot harder than just having it, healed in a moment. And I love that. And so what would you say to someone that is stuck in that cycle of shame? They're trying to walk through freedom, but you touched on how to get free physically, but about actually the mental aspect of what's going on in our hearts when we do slip up, or we do something, or, I know a lot of people struggle with porn and masturbation even now, who are probably watching this, and they're having this shame cycle that they're just going in. So what's the first step to start to have freedom from the feeling of shame?
Wow. So keeping things hidden, sin hidden grows.
Yeah.
Sin brought into the light shrivels up. So community is critical. I know if you're at Bethel Church, we've got a men's group that is just incredible, the Whole Man Project. And you get to be in a group where there'll be 4 to 8 guys, and they'll listen to you, and they will pray for you and encourage you, and whatever you share. And for some people, I've got to struggle with overworking, or some people, it's not even porn or masturbation. That's rare, but it's true. There's other, you can be overworking. You can overwork at church, and that could be your way to avoid the pain. And it's really no different than porn and masturbation as far as what it's doing to you.
Mm-hmm.
But when guys come in, it's just to listen, and sometimes, just to love them. Like we don't fix guys when they come in. We listen to them, and we don't give them advice. We don't tell them what to do. We're just like, no, we're here to listen so you can learn how to get it out into the light.
Mm-hmm.
When I met Michael and got introduced to the Whole Man Project and his experience there, and how he leads in there, first of all, I was surprised, because I thought it was an accountability group, and he said, no, it actually isn't accountability.
I never call anyone to ask how they're doing, ever.
He said, because accountability doesn't bring freedom, relationship does.
Yeah, it's so true.
And whether you're a man or a woman, and I don't know that there's anything totally formal for women in our community. I think there's been some things that they've
tried a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
And there's probably some places that we could direct women, because I agree with you. It is just as much as a problem for women as it is men. It might not be porn that they're looking at. It might be novels that they're reading. It might be more story based or video based, or, you know, it might not just be the hardcore kind of thing, but there is an element there that, and women are struggling just as much. So definitely it applies to both. And as you were talking about, you know, reaching out to people, I felt like some of the people watching are like, there's no way I could call somebody and admit, like, I just did this. But I want to ask those people, I want to challenge you to say, if one of your good friends called you and said, hey, I'm struggling with this, can I call you? Or this just happened. Would you judge them? No. You want them to experience freedom. And so I just say that to break off some of that shame that you, and just to break off the lie that you can't call somebody, that you can't find a friend who's going to cover you in this way and love on you.
I mean, if you call us. I mean, one thing that I do when I have a new group of guys is I'll just go in and I'll tell them the most embarrassing thing I ever did. I mean, the most shameful thing I ever did. I'll just tell them, and that gives them the freedom. Usually it makes them pretty uncomfortable at first, but that gives them the freedom to realize, oh, I forgot all those memories. I pretended like that never happened. But as people start to share their darkest secrets, the value is getting them into the light. The value isn't that I know, but the value is that that person knows, somebody else knows, and they still love me. Somebody else knows my story and they love me.
Yeah. And they're not alone. They're not alone.
Yeah. The more you hear other men's stories, you realize, oh, yeah, the biggest lie the devil wants you to believe is that you're the only one. And when you get into a group of people that are courageous, are willing to try, you start to discover, oh my gosh, all of us have something that we're struggling with, and it's really not that different when you get down to it. It's really, I mean, it might look a little different. Like I know some people struggle with homosexuality, and the first guy that was homosexual in my group, I said, you know, what you're struggling with looks different than what I'm doing, but I know it's the exact same. There's pain, and you're trying to figure out how to resolve that pain, and this is what you chose to do to get past that pain, and it's not working. And so I don't know exactly what your journey is going to look like, but if you take time and hang out with us, we'll find freedom together.
I love it. So good. I actually feel like there's people right now who are watching or will watch this later who this is going to be speaking to you, and you're going to be thinking, oh, there's actually things in my life that I don't want anyone to know. There are things that I'm doing sexually, especially, that I know are hindering me, but I just feel like if I told anyone, I'd be so judged and they'd never see me the same way or whatever. And so I really just want to take a moment, if you guys can pray, and just release breaking of shame and courage to make that first call. And I want to challenge everybody too. If you're watching this and you have those hidden things in your life, pick someone who's safe, someone who loves you, someone who's gracious and kind, and pick up the phone and call them, because literally walking in the light for me, all the shame's gone. Now I can say, yep, I was addicted to masturbation 10 years. There's no shame there anymore. God has literally taken that away. Funny side note, they made us in my school of ministry go to downtown Toronto and scream these things out at the top of our lungs with people all around. All of our deepest, darkest secrets I have told complete strangers and my entire school. So of like 60 plus people, and we weren't allowed to justify it, and we weren't allowed to say, why, and like this, no. We just said it, and God just broke off shame, and there's so much freedom. And that was the first step in actually stopping it completely. And so I want to put that as a challenge to you guys, but also I'd love it if one of you guys would pray, just for anybody watching this right now, to have the courage, and just anything that you've kind of found would be helpful to pray into.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'd love that. God we just invite you into this moment. God, I know just from being in group for so long that probably 80% of the people listening to this right now are in way deeper than they ever imagined they would be. And God, I just ask that you would begin to cry over them, tears to soften that shame, dissolve that shame. And God, just like you need relationship inside of the Trinity, God, that you would bring people along that would be safe, that would be compassionate, and that would be the arms of God for the people that need someone to talk to. I just pray that people would come across your path that would be the perfect people for you to vomit, vomit whatever it is out that you've been holding in, and that you would be received with love. And whether or not you are, that you'd have the capacity, God, that they would be received with love, that they would be received with compassion, and that they would have the opportunity to vomit out whatever the shame is hiding behind and get it out into the light so that it can die. God, that is a terrifying moment. I can remember in my own life. And I've seen so many men walk through that same thing, that moment of terror of, am I going to be rejected? Am I going to lose everything in this moment? And then to discover that they're loved. God, I pray for that experience on everyone listening to this. I can't be there for all those people, and I can't control their environments, and I can't tell them who the people are to talk to, but God, you can divinely make these connections. God, we need you. Amen. Oh, man.
Woo, it's fire.
That's huge. Like I would love to, I can't be there for every person, but there, I loves me, but I know there's people for everyone out there. Just and just ask God who to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also just want to release for everybody listening who's struggling that I just want to break off the lie that you are dirty, that you are a pervert, that something is broken inside of you of because you've chose this as a coping mechanism. Yeah, I just want to break that lie off of you and just eradicate it from your identity. You are a forgiven, loved son or daughter of God. And yeah, I just want to break that off because that's a lie from the enemy that wants to keep you in bondage and keep you in shame, that says something is wrong with you. Yeah. And instead, just to realize, to go, oh, it was just a coping mechanism. It was just a way I was numbing my pain. But this is a beautiful invitation from Holy Spirit today, just to identify what that pain is that you're struggling with, that's something that hasn't been healed. It's a beautiful invitation from Holy Spirit to press into getting healing in that area. It's just something that the Holy Spirit is highlighting, and to go, okay, I want to go after that so that you're not carrying this with you. Because if it isn't this coping mechanism, if it doesn't get healed, you're probably going to choose another one. And so, I mean, it could be prescription drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be, so many different options. One isn't better or worse than the other. They're just all numbing. And so I think that shifts the perspective that just because it's sexual in nature doesn't mean that the person is dirty or perverted or broken or whatever. Shame says that there's something wrong with you. And looking at porn and masturbating is something you did. It's not who you are.
Love it. That's actually was going to be what I was going to say. Literally just then, it's something you do. It's not who you are. And I love what Michael was saying when somebody calls him, I'm about to masturbate, I'm about to do this. And he goes, this is not who you are. And just reminding them of their identity. And so kind of leads me to my next question. So what does the other side of freedom look like? Let's create a picture of hope. Okay, so you get healed up, you're free from these things. We'll reverse back to some of the other questions, but right in the middle, I feel like we don't want it to be all about getting free. Let's paint a picture for the hope of you're free, you're living in perfect, not I want to say perfect purity, but amazing purity. How does that impact your relationships for the better? And what does it look like just for your life in general?
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to, this is a testimony. because I've heard Michael share his testimony about, his journey through porn and masturbation, how he struggled with it for 20, 30 years. I don't know.
I think I enjoyed it for 20 or 30 years.
And then,
but it didn't serve me.
and then how he's been free for the last 10.
Mm-hmm.
And when he tells that story, not one time that I've heard him share it, and he shares it in our class, we do touch on purity in our class. I've never felt shame attached to it.
Mm.
I've never felt shame attached to it, that he's carrying shame. And as his wife, even though it's 7 minutes past, I don't feel shame in it. And freedom, the beautiful thing about when nothing is hidden, that's freedom, is when nothing is hidden, when somebody can rummage through the doors, the rooms, the drawers of your heart, and there's nothing to find. There's no place for shame to land.
Yeah.
That's freedom.
I can answer what does freedom look like, but I'm going to have to include a little bit of the process so that it's
Tangible?
Yeah, tangible. Yeah. So I know when 10 years ago, as I was walking out of that addiction, out of porn and masturbation, I'm not going to say that addiction. I want to use words so there's no shame attached to anything. But when I was walking out of porn and masturbation, I would have periods of sobriety and then periods of porn and masturbation, periods of sobriety. And what I saw, and it took me a little while to notice what was happening, but if I would go several weeks with porn and masturbation or freedom, and then I would go back and I would masturbate for a week or so, my house, they were not present, they were not aware, I didn't tell them, but my house, my wife and my kids would be bickering, they would be fighting, they would be complaining, they would be upset and angry, and then I would stop masturbating, looking at porn, and a day or two later, there would be peace in the house. And I wasn't telling them, my guys in my men's group knew what was going on, but my house, I didn't tell my kids and my wife, and I would go for a month and everything would be beautiful. I mean, we would still have conflicts and stuff, but it would just be so much peace. The foundation, the root would be peace.
Mm-hmm.
And when I would look at porn and masturbate, or just masturbate, there would be turmoil and tension as the foundation of everything going on in the house. Now, for 10 years of marriage, that had been the normal, was tension. But I didn't have any other grid to compare it to know. And it wasn't until I walked into freedom, and it was probably a good year before I had got to freedom. It was a long process for me. Some people take longer, most people take less, but for me, I was so numb that it took me a long time to really start to understand and hear my heart. But during that process, I could see freedom and joy in my family, and I could see tension and anger. And so that purity is what drove that. And that was in my first marriage. And when freedom came, within about a year, it was probably 12 months or so later, of course, we enjoyed intimacy, we enjoyed sex. And so there'd be several times a week. But a year after I got to freedom, something happened where God came back into our intimate times. And our intimacy, our sex life went through the roof. I don't know, it's hard to explain exactly what I'm talking about there.
It's more when the intimate time shifts from being sex to worship.
Yes. So that happened, but let me to give you another, what does freedom look like? We're gonna be really honest, because I know that's gonna be the most valuable for all of you.
Mm-hmm.
When we started dating, within a month or so of us starting dating, we went past peace. Now that sounds cryptic.
It's nice. It's candy coated.
I can't remember exactly what happened. There were 3 different times when we were dating where we went farther than we wanted to. We went to past peace. And to be explicit, I'm not giving you a picture, but Lisa and I had touched her inappropriately. I had touched her breasts, I had touched her private areas, and we had given each other orgasms.
Which he since then has coined as Christian sex.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's kind of like Christian mimosas.
So we're like, no, because we asked couples, have you had sex? No, we haven't had sex. Have you had Christian sex?
Have you gone past peace?
Well, so we were strongly involved in Christian sex. And
I see what you mean. Yeah. So just to clarify, you're talking about what, it's not really, but this is our version of, yeah. So we're not like saying
there wasn't penetration, it wasn't intercourse. So we're on, technically it wasn't sex.
I see what you mean.
What we were doing was going past peace, and we were, things that should have been reserved for marriage.
And that happened early on. And so we had a conversation. We went to the prayer chapel. We rededicated our relationship and our purity to God.
Communion.
And we established some boundaries that were beyond what we had. Actually, my kids came up with incredible boundaries for themselves in dating. And if I had just stuck with those from the very beginning, we would have done fabulously well.
It's real, right? Like we have this ideal and we're like, let's go for this. And obviously the Lord helps us, but sometimes we do fall short. And I love the fact that, okay, time to regroup, reevaluate. And like you see, I think Chris Vallotton talks about, there's other leaders in Bethel as well. They're like, okay, how are we going to fix this? Like, what's the regrouping? You don't stay in that place of shame. It's actually repentance and, okay, let's move on with a plan.
Yeah. So that happened a second time, a couple months later, happened a third time, 6 weeks before we got married. And we didn't go past peace and stay there because of what I've gone through. When we went past peace, it was a, gotcha. We're not going there, devil. And came.
Honestly, what we had in place wasn't working.
Yeah, we were going past peace. I mean, we had multiple orgasms each before, and we touched each other inappropriately, and we did that. And let me continue to go to express what that cost us. But the third time, I said, okay, for the next 6 weeks before we get married, we're not going to kiss. Not everybody was happy with that decision. But I know, and guys, I'm going to tell you this right now. It's the man's responsibility to carry purity.
Come on.
If God was talking with Lisa, he would ask Lisa, how are you doing with purity? But if he's talking to us, he's going to ask me, how is purity doing? He's not going to ask Lisa. It's my job to manage purity in our dating relationship and in our marriage. And of course, for me individually as well. So those last 6 weeks, we didn't kiss. And we made it. We made the last 6 weeks not going past peace. It was beautiful.
We kissed the last week.
We did kiss a couple times, because at that point I'm like, okay, good, and I managed purity well.
And I wasn't thrilled, because for me, I didn't feel like kissing was a gateway. Like
it wasn't for her. She was okay.
Right.
For me,
he knew that's the level that he needed to be at in order to protect us and keep us on that side of peace. So in that, I respected it. I felt covered in it. I felt he was creating safety for both of us. And let me just remind those who didn't know, at the time we had 5 teenage kids. Like, we not only were we trying to do this for ourselves, but we wanted to set a great example for our kids. Now, it wasn't a perfect example.
We set a great example of how to recover too.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's actually useful for most of the world, because I mean, what is the death on the cross is because God knew we were going to need a way to come back every time.
Yeah.
And but you asked the question a while back of what does freedom look like? And so we went through failing 3 different times, going past peace 3 different times before we got married. And I'm going to be real honest with you, that cost us something. The first 9 months of marriage, we enjoyed sex, but it was the kind of sex that God created sex to be enjoyable, so we would keep procreating as a species without him.
I like what Beck said. She goes, your body doesn't know
you're Christian.
Yeah,
your body doesn't know you're Christian. So we were having, for this first 9 months of our marriage, We were having that kind of sex. We enjoyed it. It was pleasurable. We wanted to keep doing it. But I had this memory in my mind of a few years earlier where I had gotten to incredible sex, where God was part of it, was worship. It honestly was worship. And you can tell it means something to me. And the first 9 months of our marriage, I know, God, this is good, but this is not holy. This is not holy, worshipful intimacy, whatever you want to call it. And I haven't heard the church talk about it, so it sounds probably weird and awkward for some people, but I had experienced worship, or I had experienced sex as worship with God. And I know the first 9 months of our relationship, honestly, where we had gone before we got married, it was totally selfish. It was because we wanted to feel something we were missing. We were trying to fill a hole, and so it was a completely selfish act when we went past peace. And honestly, the first 9 months of marriage, we still were dealing with that seed of selfishness we had planted. And it wasn't until 9 months into marriage where I can remember the day we finished our time of intimacy, we finished sex, and I'm like, God was here. God finally felt like he could come into the room because we had gotten rid of and put away and we had prayed about it. We had gone to God and say, hey, we're married. We're not where we want to be.
Knowing that there's a whole nother level we could go to. Not any shame or blame or even not enjoying where we were, but just knowing there's more, right? Knowing there's more.
Yeah, there was no shame, blame, guilt, or anything. But I'm like, God, I know there's more. And it was a 9 month. Now, I'm not saying it's got to be 9 months. It might be 1 month, might be 1 week, might be 5 minutes, or it might be 10 years. But because we allowed that in before we got married, it cost us something in our marriage. It cost us 9 months of average sex. And I'll tell you right now, you have one night of incredible sex where God is there and it's worship, and 9 months of sex is worthless.
And I'm sure a lot of you can identify, if you think about those moments you've had in worship, in this corporate worship setting, that Holy Spirit shows up and it just rocks you. And you can remember that. You still can crave it. You can feel that. You have that memory of that and you want that. And so to have that in marriage, a similar experience. And we even shifted the music we listen to while we are having our intimate time. Like, we actually play worship music.
Yes.
So I just mentioned that because we've shared that with some of our clients and they're like, oh, we didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah. So your first question was, what does that freedom look like? And God created sex to be the most incredible bonding, connecting, and ultimately reproducing. God gave us the ability to be like God because we can create life out of our intimacy. We can be like God in that moment. We're actually creating life, and God wants to be part of that moment where he's like, see, I made you in my image. I gave you the ability to recreate yourself.
Now, that might not feel like a direct answer to what does freedom look like for a single person, but I actually want to throw that out there as hope, as like a promised land vision for you, something to look forward to and to go, that's a reason to have a why. That's why, that to strengthen your why of why it's worth waiting, because that's possible. That's what you want. That's the desire to have in your marriage. And so that's what we're going for. And so what we do now makes a difference.
I love that. I'm like, that has given me so much hope, and I receive it. Like,
woo, woo.
Yeah, well, I'm like, let's not even joke around, let's not even hide the fact that we all want to have amazing sex lives when we're married. Like, I feel like it's not a shameful thing to talk about. God created it for marriage, and I have no problem saying, yeah, I received that, and it's going to be great. And I love, I've heard Havilah Cunningham talk about it. I've heard other leaders talk about it as well. Hey, we're going to go do some warfare. we'll be back later, um, and that's that place. Or even I was doing single life workshop, and the leaders there were talking about worship as like sex as worship, but actually the Lord coming in, the presence of the Lord being so strong in it. And I love what you guys have said, and really practically, thank you for being so vulnerable as well with your journey through that. There was something that you touched on though, Michael, that I'd love to ask about. And this kind of comes back to something Lisa also was like, hey, we should ask Michael about this. So male leadership with purity. And so I really like what you were saying about with your family. If you were masturbating and watching porn, then you could see the difference in your family. And I was thinking, do you think that's because the male is the spiritual head of the household, and whatever you're doing is impacting on a spiritual level your family as well? And then also to follow that through, as you're single, how can you start to, as a man, lead your family well, your future family well, and put things in place so that as a spiritual covering, as a spiritual head, you're actually protecting them?
Yeah. So yes, God just laid out a structure of the Trinity, the husband, the wife, the kids, and I don't. I'm sure there's reasons why he laid it out that way, but the truth is, he just did, and it's not because the man is more qualified. There are times where there are times where I actually, hey, Lisa, I need to remember to do something. Lisa, I need you to help me remember. I'm willing to do it, but your capacity to remember is a million times better than mine. But for whatever reason, God set it up in that way. And I know that starts bringing up uh, leadership, it brings up submission, it brings up all that.
Yeah, but can I just say, like, I'm a visual person, so I think in pictures. So if you think of God the Father and Holy Spirit and Jesus, and they're, like he said, the large covering and umbrella, and the man is the next level of umbrella that covers. So God and, the Trinity covers the whole family, and then the husband covers and protects the wife and the children, and that's how it works. So if you think about it, if the man is opening up the door to invite, through sin, he's opening a door to the enemy coming in, it will affect the family because it's like a hole in the umbrella.
It was instantaneous, like within minutes. I mean, the house would change, and it's like I was no longer maintaining self-control. I was no longer choosing to keep that guard up. When I let that guard down, when I chose into selfishness, when I chose into not protecting my family, they didn't even know what was happening. Like, they were not aware that they were happy one week and not happy the next. But if I had told them, they would have seen it. They just were like, no, I'm just grumpy, I'm just aggravated. But like, no, when I maintain purity, you guys don't even have to struggle with that stuff.
And this doesn't just apply to families. We just had a conversation on Friday with a couple who they're not married, but the guy has a home and he has a housemate. And he said the housemate has been struggling and is walking out his journey to purity from porn and masturbation, but they're both feelers, and they said they could feel in the house, in the atmosphere, when he hasn't been sober, because it's affecting the entire atmosphere. And I know within BSSM, because so many people are sharing homes, that sometimes there's a lot of tension and they're not really understanding what's going on. And so I'm just suggesting, I'm not saying it is it, but just suggesting that this could be coming into play into the home dynamics. So just something to be aware of. It's not just within families, it's within whatever home environment that this is taking place.
And it's super critical that the man lead. If the man doesn't lead, the woman does have authority and can lead, but it's never, God just set it up that way for whatever reason. And I'm sure there's a brilliant reason, but I don't know all of his reason, but I know that it exists. And when I do a great job of covering this home, Lisa, I know there's there are things from Lisa's past that are high triggers for her. And when I'm just doing a good job of staying connected with God, her her moments of being triggered are way more mild. And it's
It's like news to me.
I don't think I've ever told her that.
No,
I don't think
interesting.
I've told her that.
That's cool.
But when I'm feeling really close to God, I can and I can see something happen. I'm like, oh God, just keep pouring in right now. But you mentioned, now I'm going to jump. You mentioned, what can singles do?
Yes.
Okay, well, I was single. I got freedom, had a stronghold of freedom for several years, and my wife died. So I was single. I can tell you, the first off, maintaining purity. Maintaining purity. It's the exact same skill in single as you maintain purity in a dating relationship. And it's the exact same skill of maintaining purity, but also somehow passionate, intimate sex is part of that. Even though it looks like a no before, that no before is actually the same thing that creates an incredible yes after marriage.
Because it actually protects and creates safety within the love life of a married couple. Because it's preventing you from looking outside your marriage. It's preventing you from comparison. It's preventing you from, while you're in the very active sex, of imagining other people, right? It actually takes discipline to do those things as well.
In the first day after my wife passed away, I continued praying for my wife. I didn't know who it was, but 12 years ago, I started praying. 13 years ago, I started praying for my wife every morning. Get up at 5 o'clock, I pray for her for 15 minutes. And the day she died, the next morning, I kept praying. And there were 2 years that I didn't know who I was praying for, but I never stopped praying for my wife, for praying for purity, praying for every aspect. And then when we started dating, I was like, well, I'm going to pray for Lisa because she's my target right now. And of course, we ended up getting married, so it was a great investment. But if you're single, start praying for your spouse every morning. Make it the very first thing you do. It doesn't have to be 5 a.m., but whatever time it is, the very first thing you do. And I don't know if it changes Lisa, but when I pray for her every day, it changes me because I get God's perspective of her. Mm. And if I was frustrated or she said something mean the other day or whatever, I get the right perspective first thing in the morning. The very first words out of my mouth created me the right perspective towards her for the day.
And you could say, okay, well, that doesn't apply to me because I'm not in a relationship. No, but it builds the habit of doing it.
I was single for 2 years praying for my wife. No clue who she was. It
builds the habit. It creates the space in your life to be doing that for when that person steps in.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's not about purity, but yeah. If you dream of going on lots of dates with your wife one day, start going on lots of dates today. Because if you're not doing it today, it's not going to happen when you're married without a radical change.
So you mean with the girl that you're dating, like go on lots of dates with them, or just in general?
So when I was single, when Deborah died, the next week I took my daughter out on a date. And I called my mom and my sister every day. And
he's just talking about making space in your finances, making space in your schedule for time, just creating space for the things that you want in marriage. But
so, and purity,
that's awesome.
All of that.
I love that. Oh, so I think a really good question to end on then is, so say a couple has decided to be exclusive, they're gonna date, all systems are go, we're not gonna date anyone else. When do they talk about the purity plan and what needs to be in the purity plan?
Well, if they've expressed that they're exclusive, that would be a great time to talk about it. And honestly, in our singles class, we that's the first half of it is personal, talking about personal development. And that's when we cover, hey, what is your purity plan? What does it look like for you to maintain peace successfully? And that's part of you before you're in a relationship. Mm-hmm. Like if you want to succeed in a relationship, don't come up with your plan when you're going out to sea. Already have your anchor on board.
Have your life rafts.
Have your life preservers, life. And so we have we have one of the homework assignments is for everyone to come up with what are their guidelines for dating, that to maintain purity in dating.
Because you all know what your particular weaknesses are. You know
Yeah.
what your history is. You know where you're likely to slip and where you're not, and what do you need in place to set you up for success. So having all that stuff in place before you step into a relationship is really important, because your purity plan doesn't depend on what the other person's is necessarily. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, your standards are your standards long before you meet someone.
Mm-hmm.
And then talking about those, having an open conversation. And so I would say another key to success that we found is really relevant, and we actually did practice this, is that you invite community in. Invite community into your relationship. If you're dating, invite community in.
Yeah, and let them know
how you're doing.
Like when we coach couples that are dating or engaged, I'll just ask them, like, of course, how's purity doing? Oh, good. Has your penis gone in her vagina?
Straight questions. It's easy, and the reason why is because it's easy to tap dance.
Smile. I say it with a smile on my face to let you know I love you. If that's happened, I've loved you, but I know there's a better way, and I would like to help you go there. And if I don't ask that question, you're not likely to tell me the truth. Or you're likely to tell me the truth, but you're going to bend it in a way that looks good because it's who you really are. I mean, you're going to try to bend it to who you really are, but I need to know the truth so we can get it out.
Right. So, and then we walk couples through restoration, and,
so much fun.
Yes. So I do want to say really quick, because you mentioned the Single Life Workshop, Lori and Barry Burns have an incredible ministry for singles and for married. And they have an app, that Nothing Hidden Ministries app. And they have a lot of great tools on there. It's $2.99. It's a great app. And there is a breaking soul ties prayer that you can lead through, forgiveness. There's lots of different prayers that are on there. So we actually we walk with people through that process in terms of just breaking soul ties, either with someone from their past or even as a couple. We walk them through that, through forgiveness and restoration. And there was a couple that got married yesterday.
Yes.
And it was so much fun to walk them into purity 6 weeks before they got married, so that they could go on their wedding day with nothing hidden and shame-free, and to step into it. It was so beautiful.
I mean, if you fail, okay, stand up. You can do it.
Yeah. Anyway, we know we need to wrap up, but this has been such a great opportunity. And
Thank you so much, guys. Sorry, I just muted at the end because my roommates were coming in and like rustling things. But I love it because you guys are like, can just go and I can just listen, and it's all just gold anyway. It's so good. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. I just want to honor you guys for giving your time. Like, you don't have to do this, but I love that you see our community, you see the singles, and you want to pour out and give them the benefit of your wisdom and experience. And thank you so much for being raw and real, because again, we need that. And even in BSSM, they don't pull any punches. When we have Purity Week, we have Sex Week. And so I feel like this is really keeping with the tone of the culture that's being created around sex and around purity already. And so I love that you guys went deep and went raw and went real. And that's what we need if we're really going to get to a place of breakthrough. We need to be able to actually talk about real things in the church and actually lead people to that. So yeah, I just really want to honor you guys. I'm so thankful for you. I can't wait until we have another call about another amazing topic. But just want to thank you so much.
Yeah, I just want to plug really quick. We are gearing up and planning for our next classes that are going to kick off next month. So if people are interested in what we've talked about, our classes, kind of learning, discovering how amazing they are, and actually, doing homework assignments to help them, set up.
Singles getting ready. Singles who want to be ready to date.
Yeah, and that emotionally and spiritually healthy, and that they're wholehearted. So we are probably going to be doing a class out of our home for 10 to 12 people. And then we're looking at doing an online class for, maybe up to 100 people. And so we will be posting that information on our website, hopefully in the next week. So that will kick off probably between the 15th and 22nd of September. And so we also could put it on the website and let people know too, if that's what they're interested.
We have so much fun.
Awesome. So what's it called? Sorry. What's the course called?
Well, so it has,
is this the one that doesn't, it's not the Fully Alive, it's something else?
Well, it has been the Fully Alive.
It has been Fully Alive at Bethel Church, and our online class was Choose to Love.
So we're just still trying to decide on a name. So if anybody has suggestions for names.
That's why we're not going to have it up for a week.
Okay, you've got a week to pray and just be like, okay, God, what do I call this thing?
Do we call it healthy dating, the dating journey? I don't know, the dating discovery, or just leave it?
Yes.
Yeah.
You could call it like fully alive daters or something, just really like just a little out there and like
We're working on it. We'll figure it out. And at the
I
end
love
of the
it.
day, it'll be incredible whether the name is
No matter what the name is.
Yes, exactly. I love that because usually people come up with the name first and then have the whole course, but you guys are kind of doing it in reverse. I know that you had a name, but now it's kind of like
Yes.
Yeah. The issue is that we came up with Fully Alive, and then a few months later, Justin and Abby Stumble, they did an e-course called Fully Alive, which is great. So now we don't want to launch our e-course with the same name and it feel like there's
competition,
any competition or confusion. We just want to honor them with that.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. Oh, love you guys. You're amazing. Thank you so much for being here. And I can't wait to hear from you guys again. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Bless you. Bye.